The bombs had stopped falling an hour ago, but the buildings were still burning. Sergeant Cole moved through the smoke with his rifle raised, stepping over broken concrete and twisted metal. His ears rang from the explosions. His throat burned from the dust. 3 years of war had taught him how to keep moving when everything inside him wanted to stop. He was a combat medic with the 47th Colonial Marines. His job was to keep soldiers alive long enough to reach the hospital ships. He had saved hundreds of lives. He had also watched hundreds die. The math never balanced in his favor. The squad had gotten separated in the chaos. One moment they were pushing through the alien residential district. The next a building collapsed and found himself alone in the gray maze of ruined streets. He tried his radio, but only static answered. He would have to find his own way back. They had lived here before the war came. Their homes were strange to human eyes, built tall and narrow with walls that curved like shells. Most were rubble now. Tried not to think about who had lived in them. Thinking made everything harder. He heard the sound before he saw anything. It was high and thin, like a broken whistle. It came from inside a half-collapsed structure to his left. Stopped. He should keep moving. He should find his unit. Protocol was clear about unnecessary risks. But the sound came again, and something in it made his chest tight. It sounded like crying. He entered the building carefully, rifle first. The ceiling had fallen in places, and pale light streamed through the holes. Dust floated in the beams like snow. The crying grew louder as he moved deeper inside. Then he saw them. A child crouched in the corner, barely bigger than a human 6-year-old. Its scales shimmered between blue and silver, catching the light as it trembled. 4 large eyes stared at nothing, wet with tears that looked almost human. The child was hunched over a body, an adult who lay still and cold, killed by falling stone. Had seen before, he had fought them. He had watched them kill his friends. But he had never seen one like this, so small and broken and lost. The child was making that sound again, that high keening cry, and it hit somewhere deep in his chest where the war had not reached. He lowered his rifle. The child saw him and went silent. Those 4 eyes went wide with terror. It pressed itself against the wall, trying to disappear, shaking so hard that could see it from across the room. He held up his empty hands. He did not know if the gesture meant anything too. He only knew he could not point a weapon at something so afraid. "Hey," he said softly, "it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The child did not understand his words. Of course it did not. But maybe it understood his voice because it stopped trying to push through the wall. Heard boots behind him. He turned to see 4 human soldiers entering the building, rifles raised. They were not from his unit. Their armor was marked with different colors, a different squad from the Eastern push. "Contact," one of them said flatly, seeing the child. "Stand down," said immediately. "It's just a kid." The soldier who had spoken looked at like he was insane. It's a child." Same thing. The soldier raised his rifle, aiming at the small, trembling figure in the corner. "No witnesses, no complications. You know how this works, Sergeant." Moved without deciding to move. One moment he was standing between the soldiers and the child. The next he was kneeling in front of the small alien body, his back to the rifles, shielding the child with everything he had. "What the hell are you doing?" The soldier's voice was sharp with confusion. "She's scared," said. He did not know if the child was female. He did not care. "She's alone, her family is dead, and you want to shoot her." "It's war." "She's not the war." Looked over his shoulder at the soldiers. He knew how this could end. He was one medic against 4 armed Marines. If they wanted the child dead, there was nothing he could do except die first. "Lower your weapons, that's an order." "You don't outrank me." "Then report me, court-martial me, I don't care." Turned back to the child, who was staring at him now with something other than fear. Confusion, maybe, wonder. "I'm not moving." The silence stretched. Could hear his own heartbeat, loud in his ears. He waited for the sound of gunfire. He waited to die for something that made no sense, that broke every rule of survival he had learned. The gunfire never came. "You're insane," the soldier said finally. "You know that, you're completely insane." Heard them leave, their footsteps fading into the ruined streets. He let out a breath he did not know he was holding. His hands were shaking. The child was still pressed against the wall, watching him. "Okay," said more to himself than to her. "Okay, now what?" He did not have an answer. He was alone in enemy territory with an alien child who could not understand him and no way to contact his unit. The smart thing would be to leave, to find his squad, to forget this ever happened. He looked at the child's eyes, huge and luminous and full of tears, and knew he could not do the smart thing. "Come on," he said gently, holding out his hand. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The child did not take his hand, but when he stood and moved toward the door, she followed him. She moved like a shadow, staying close to his legs, still trembling but no longer frozen in terror. They made it 3 streets before the warriors found them. Saw them descend from the rooftops like falling water, 6 of them, tall and armored and carrying weapons that hummed with energy. He pushed the child behind him and raised his empty hands again. This was the end. He was sure of it. But the child made a sound, a specific call that rang through the dusty air, and the warriors stopped. They looked at. They looked at the child pressed against his back. They looked at the way he stood between her and danger, even though he was the enemy, even though he had no hope of winning. They did not kill him. Not yet. The cell was clean but cold. Sat on a thin sleeping mat and watched the pale light shift through the narrow window. He had been a prisoner for 12 days. He was still alive. He did not understand why. They had brought him to a medical facility behind their lines. They had treated his wounds, given him food and water, and locked him in this small room. No one had hurt him. No one had questioned him. He simply existed in this strange, quiet space, waiting for something he could not name. The child came to see him every day. Her name was Ra. He had learned this from the guards, who spoke enough human language to communicate basic things. She was the last surviving child of a minor house, a family nearly destroyed by the war. The adult had found dead was her Val's hen, a kind of ant guardian who had raised her while her mother commanded soldiers in distant battles. Ra should not have been anywhere near his cell. She was important, the last heir of her bloodline, and he was the enemy. But she came anyway, slipping past the guards who seemed unable to stop her. She would sit outside his door for hours, making soft sounds that might have been words or might have been songs. Sometimes she pushed small objects through the gap at the bottom of the door, colorful stones, twisted pieces of metal. Once, a flower that smelled like honey and rain. Kept every gift. He did not know why she gave them or what they meant. He only knew that this small, broken child had decided he was worth remembering, and that meant more to him than he could explain. On the 15th day, the High Matriarch arrived. He heard her before he saw her, her voice cutting through the facility like a blade. The guards straightened. The medical staff scattered, and then his door opened and she was there. Eth stood 8 feet tall, her scales dark as midnight with streaks of burning gold. She wore armor that seemed to flow like water, and her 4 eyes burned with a cold light that made blood freeze. This was a being who had killed more humans than he could count. This was a being who had lost her mate and 2 of her children to this war. This was a being who had every reason to tear him apart with her bare hands. She was Ra's mother. Stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. He did not try to speak. He did not think words would help him now. The matriarch studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved over his face, his body, his hands. She was reading him, he realized, looking for something. He did not know what. "Why?" she said finally. Her voice was deep and musical, her accent strange but clear. "Why did you protect my daughter?" Had thought about this question every day since the ruins. He still did not have a good answer. She was afraid, he said simply. She was alone, she was just a child. She is, you are human, we are at war. I know. You should have killed her. Your people have killed our children before. We have found the bodies. Felt something twist in his chest. Shame, maybe, horror. He had heard rumors but had never wanted to believe them. I'm not those people. No, the matriarch stepped closer, towering over him. Then what are you? A fool, a traitor, a man who wants to die. I don't know, met her eyes, forcing himself not to look away. I just know that when I saw her crying over her guardian's body, I couldn't hurt her. I couldn't let anyone else hurt her either. Maybe that makes me a fool. Maybe I should have walked away, but I didn't. I couldn't. The matriarch was silent. Her expression was impossible to read, her alien features showing nothing that could interpret. He waited for the killing blow, the order for his execution, the end of everything. Instead, he heard a small sound from the doorway. Ra stood there, watching them with huge, wet eyes. She must have followed her mother, slipping past the guards once again. She looked then at her mother, and then she did something that changed everything. She ran to and wrapped her thin arms around his leg. She made a sound, a specific call, high and sweet and desperate. The guards gasped. The matriarch went completely still. Eth, one of the guards whispered. She calls Eth. Did not know what that meant, but he could see from the matriarch's face that it was significant. Her cold expression cracked, showing something raw and broken underneath. She claims you, Eth said slowly. She claims you as Valshen, as family, as protector. The matriarch closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a conflict could finally read. Pain and duty and love all tangled together. By the ancient law, when a child calls Eth, the one she claims is bound to her house. She has chosen you. What does that mean? It means I cannot kill you. The matriarch's voice was bitter. It means you belong to us now, human, to her, to me. She looked down at her daughter, who still clung to his leg with fierce determination. The law is sacred. I cannot break it, not even for vengeance, not even for hate. Looked at the small child holding onto him like he was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. He looked at the matriarch, whose hatred was still visible but whose hands remained at her sides. He looked at the guards, who watched with expressions of shock and horror. What happens now? He asked. Eth turned away, her back stiff with emotion she would not show. When she spoke again, her voice was flat and cold. He comes with us, to they. She paused at the door, not looking back. My daughter has claimed a human. The council will demand answers. The other houses will call for blood. But the law is the law. She walked out without another word. Ra looked up with her luminous eyes, and he saw something there that broke his heart and healed it at the same time. Trust. Complete and absolute trust from a child who had every reason to fear him. Okay, he said softly, placing his hand gently on her head. I guess we're doing this. He did not know what waited for him on an alien. He did not know if he would survive the week. But a small girl had chosen him when she had nothing else to hold on to, and he would not let her down. He had made his choice in the ruins of Prime. Now he would live with it. The other was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Great spires of crystal rose from seas the color of liquid silver. Cities hung from the sides of mountains like frozen waterfalls. The sky shifted through shades of purple and gold, lit by 3 distant suns that never fully set. Stood in the garden of house, watching Ra chase small glowing insects through the flower beds. 2 months had passed since he arrived on. He was still alive. Some days, that fact surprised him more than others. The first weeks had been the hardest. Others looked at him like he was a disease walking among them. Servants refused to serve him. Warriors spat at his feet. 3 times, assassins had tried to kill him in his sleep. Each time, the household guards had stopped them at the last moment, bound by their duty to protect anyone claimed by the matriarch's daughter. But slowly, very slowly, something began to change. It started with small things. learned the language, stumbling through the musical syllables until they began to make sense. He learned their customs, their gestures, their silences. He learned that they valued duty above all else, that their children were sacred because they were rare, that the war with humanity had started when human colonies destroyed the nesting grounds where eggs grew. He began to understand why they hated his kind. He did not agree with everything they had done in response, but he understood. Ra helped him. She was patient with his mistakes, laughing at his accent but never cruelly. She taught him the names of flowers and stars. She showed him her favorite hiding spots in the vast house. She fell asleep against his shoulder during long, quiet evenings, and he held still so he would not wake her. He was her Val's hen now, her guardian, her family. The role meant something to both of them. Eth watched all of this from a distance. The matriarch had not spoken to since the day she brought him here. She attended to her duties, commanded her warriors, argued with the war council through long nights, but sometimes caught her looking at him and her daughter together, and he saw something shift in those cold, golden eyes. One evening, everything changed. Ra was playing in the outer gardens when heard her scream. He ran without thinking, his heart pounding in his chest, his body moving faster than it had in years. He found her cornered by an owl, a venomous creature that looked like a snake made of smoke and glass. It had escaped from somewhere, drawn by the warmth of the garden, and now it was coiling to strike. Threw himself between them. The creature bit him on the forearm, sinking its crystal fangs deep into his flesh. Pain exploded through his body like fire. He grabbed the thing's head with his free hand and snapped its neck with a strength he did not know he had. The guards arrived seconds later. Ra was crying, pressing her small hands against his wound, begging him to be okay. Someone carried him inside. Medics surrounded him, their voices sharp with confusion. A owl bite should have killed him in minutes. Children had no defense against the venom, but human biology was strange as they were learning. His body fought the poison with a fury that surprised everyone, including himself. He survived. When he woke, Eth was sitting beside his bed. She looked different without her armor, smaller somehow, almost fragile. Her scales caught the soft light, and her 4 eyes held an expression he could not read. "You almost died," she said quietly. "I know. For her, for my daughter, you almost died." Tried to shrug, then winced at the pain in his arm. She needed help, I helped. The matriarch was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer than he had ever heard it. "I have watched you these past weeks. I have looked for the trick, the lie, the hidden cruelty. I have waited for you to show your true face." She paused, her hands folding in her lap. "I was wrong. You have no hidden face. You are simply this. A man who protects children. A man who learns our songs. A man who almost dies fighting an owl because my daughter was afraid." "I don't understand your people," admitted. "Not really, but I understand her. She lost everything and she's still trying to smile. That's worth protecting." Eth closed her eyes briefly. "My people call humans monsters. We tell stories of your cruelty, your chaos, your violence without purpose. We teach our children to fear you." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "But you looked at my child and saw a child, not an enemy, not a tool, just a small scared person who needed help. We have forgotten how to see that way." A young scholar had come to study in his first month here. He remembered what she had told the council, the words that had spread through the great houses like ripples in water. "Humans are not what we believed," she had said. "They are chaos, but not the chaos of destruction, the chaos of possibility. They do not calculate when to be kind. They simply are kind and let the consequences follow." Now, looking at the matriarch beside his bed, saw that those words had reached her too. "The war is killing both of us," she said softly. "My people, your people, we are bleeding each other dry, and for what? Land that neither side can hold, vengeance that never ends, pride that poisons everything." "I don't know how to stop it," said. "I'm just a medic, I don't make the decisions." No, but perhaps you could help those who do. She stood slowly, her tall form casting shadows across the room. Rest now, heal. We will speak more when you are stronger. She paused at the door, looking back at him one last time. My daughter chose well, she said. I understand that now. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that I am grateful. You gave her something I could not. You gave her hope. She left before could respond. He lay in the darkness, feeling the bandage on his arm, thinking about a war that had consumed his entire adult life, thinking about a child who taught him alien songs, thinking about a mother who was beginning to see him as something other than an enemy. Sleep came slowly, but when it came, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, he did not dream of burning cities. The War Council chamber was vast and cold, filled with holographic displays showing troop movements and casualty reports. Stood at its center, the only human ever to enter this room, surrounded by 12 of the most powerful matriarchs in the Dominion. They were not happy to see him. You ask us to consider peace, said Matriarch Aura, her voice sharp as broken glass. After everything humans have done to us, after our children burned in their nests, after our mates died screaming on a dozen worlds. Yes, Eth answered from beside, that is exactly what I ask. The chamber erupted in anger. Voices overlapped in the musical tongue, harsh and bitter and full of old wounds. Stood still, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the storm to pass. He had learned that lesson in his months among them. Wait, listen, let the anger burn itself out. It had taken 8 months to reach this moment. 8 months of Eth working through back channels, building alliances, calling in favors from houses that owed her debts. 8 months of learning everything he could about both sides of the war, seeing the full picture for the first time. The destroyed nesting grounds, the massacred colonies, the atrocities that both species preferred to forget. Neither side was innocent. Neither side was pure evil. They were both just people, terrified and grieving and trapped in a cycle of violence that fed on itself. Now they had one chance to break that cycle. The human high command had agreed to meet, skeptical but desperate. The council had agreed to listen, furious but exhausted. And a combat medic who had never wanted to be important stood at the center of it all. Tell them, Eth said when the shouting finally faded, tell them what you have seen among us. Took a breath. His voice was steady when he spoke, though his heart raced. I have seen mothers who cannot sleep because they dream of children they will never hold again. I have seen warriors who cry in the darkness when they think no one is watching. I have seen a little girl who lost everything still learning to laugh, still reaching for joy because that is what children do. He looked around the chamber, meeting those alien eyes one by one. I have seen myself in you, in all of you. We are not so different. We bleed the same colors. We weep the same tears. We love our children with the same desperate fire. Pretty words, Aura said coldly, but words do not undo the past. No, they don't. Nothing can undo the past, but we can choose what comes next. Stepped forward, ignoring the guards who tensed at his movement. I am asking you to imagine something. Imagine a galaxy where you grow up without learning to hate, where human and ships pass each other in peace, where the nesting grounds are rebuilt and the colonies flourish, and we remember this war as the terrible thing that taught us to do better. And if we cannot imagine this, if the hate runs too deep, then we keep killing each other until there is no one left to hate. His voice dropped. I have been in war for 3 years. I have watched friends die. I have watched enemies die. And I have learned one thing, one truth that I cannot escape. Killing does not end grief. It only multiplies it. Every death creates more mourners, and those mourners create more soldiers, and those soldiers create more deaths. The cycle never ends, not unless someone is brave enough to stop. The chamber was quiet now. The matriarchs looked at each other, at Eth, at the human who spoke their language with an accent that still sounded like a child's. The peace talks will begin in 3 days, Eth said. On neutral ground. Human delegates will be there. Delegates will be there. And this man will stand between us, proof that our peoples can coexist, proof that mercy is possible. The council agreed, though not happily. It was enough. 3 days later, found himself in a different chamber, facing a different wall of hostile faces. The human delegation had arrived on a station that orbited a dead world, a fitting place to decide the fate of the living. They looked at him like a traitor. He had expected that. Sergeant Cole, the lead negotiator's voice was ice. You understand the position you have put us in. I understand that I saved a child's life and was adopted by her people, kept his voice calm. I did not choose this, but I do not regret it. You have lived among the enemy. You have learned their secrets. Some would call that treason. Some would call it an opportunity. Looked at the generals and politicians, the people who decided whether billions lived or died. I know things no human has ever known. I have seen their customs, their hearts, and I am telling you they are tired. They are grieving. They want this war to end as much as we do. The negotiations took weeks. There were setbacks, moments when everything almost collapsed, when ancient hatreds rose up and threatened to drown the fragile hope they were building. On the fourth day, assassins attacked both delegations, sent by those on both sides who feared peace more than war. And Eth fought side by side, his medical knowledge saving her life when she took a wound, her combat skills protecting him when the attackers focused their fury on the human traitor. The assassination attempt failed, and somehow, impossibly, it strengthened their position. It proved that extremists existed on both sides, and that the moderate majority could not let those extremists win. On the 17th day, during a session that had stretched into bitter argument, something unexpected happened. Ra was not supposed to be there. Eth had left her safe on the ship, surrounded by guards. But children find ways around guards, especially children who have learned to slip through shadows. She walked into the negotiation chamber, small and bright among the giant figures of war and politics. She approached the human delegation, and they fell silent at the sight of her. An alien child walking toward them without fear. She held out her hands. In them was a small metal figure, shaped like an animal had described to her long ago. A dog, he had called it. She had asked him to make one for her, and he had, using scraps from the workshop. Valshen made this, she said in careful, accented English, had taught her the words. He is good, he is kind, more of you are kind, more of us are kind, please. Her voice broke, but she kept going. Please stop the burning. The room was absolutely still. Saw hard faces soften. He saw eyes that had held nothing but hatred for years suddenly fill with something else. He saw a general, a man who had ordered bombardments that killed thousands, wipe at his face with the back of his hand. A child had asked them to stop the burning. And finally, they began to listen. The treaty was not signed that day. Politics and logistics took time, but the trajectory changed. The impossible became possible. Peace was no longer a dream but a destination. As they left the chamber that night, Eth walked beside. Her hand brushed against his, a gesture so quick he almost missed it. You have given my daughter back to me, she said quietly. You have given my people a future. I do not know what to do with a debt that cannot be repaid. Looked at Ra, who had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhausted by the weight of history. Just let me stay, he said. That's enough. Eth said nothing, but she did not pull away. And when they returned to the ship, she showed him to quarters beside her own, where he could hear Ra breathing through the wall. It felt for the first time in years like coming home. 3 years had passed since the Treaty of Prime. The galaxy had changed. Stood on the observation deck of the first joint human colony, watching transport ships descend through clouds the color of copper. Below him, a city was being born. Human architects worked alongside builders, their designs merging into something new, something neither species had imagined alone. Children of both kinds played in the half-finished parks, their laughter mixing in the thin air. He never went back to Earth. It was not that he was unwanted there. He was a hero now, the man who had bridged two worlds, his face on news broadcasts and his name in history books. But Earth felt like a memory, a place he had been in another life. His family was here now, in the great house that had become his home. Ra had grown. She was approaching her first, the equivalent of becoming a young adult. She was taller than now, her scales shifting through colors he did not have names for, her 4 eyes sharp with intelligence and curiosity. She spoke both languages perfectly, switching between them without pause. She was not quite anymore, not in the traditional sense. She was something new, shaped by two cultures instead of one. She would give a speech at her ceremony. The whole house had been preparing for weeks, had helped her practice, listening as she stumbled over words and found her way through ideas that challenged everything her people had believed. The day arrived under clear purple skies. The ceremony took place in the great hall of house, filled with more guests than could count. Human diplomats stood beside nobles. Former enemies shared food and drink, still awkward but no longer hostile. The galaxy was watching because Ra's story had become everyone's story. She stood before them all, small against the vast tapestries that told the history of her house, and spoke. "They told me humans were monsters," she began, her voice clear and strong. "They told humans we were monsters. We were both wrong." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. "My Valshen is human. He found me in the ruins of my city, crying over my guardian's body. He did not hurt me. He protected me. He stood between me and death when he had nothing to gain and everything to lose." Felt Eth's hand on his arm, a quiet pressure that had become familiar over the years. "He is the bravest person I know," Ra continued. "Not because he fights, because he stopped fighting, because when it was easier to hate, he chose to protect. When it was safer to walk away, he stayed." She looked directly at him now, her eyes bright with emotion. "I want to be like him. I want to build things instead of burn them. I want to look at strangers and see family waiting to happen." The applause was loud enough to shake the walls. Human voices and voices together, making a sound that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Later, when the crowds had thinned and the celebration moved to quieter rooms, found himself alone with Eth on a balcony overlooking the crystal forests of her. Stars were beginning to appear, strange constellations that he had learned to name. "I was so lost," he said quietly. "After everything I'd seen, everything I'd done, I didn't know if there was anything left in me worth saving. And then there was this scared kid in the rubble and I just acted. I didn't think about sides or species or any of it. I just saw a child who needed help." Eth was quiet for a moment, watching the stars with him. "That is what we never understood about humans," she finally said. "We thought your chaos was weakness. We thought your emotions made you easy to break, but your chaos is this. You do not calculate when to be kind. You simply are kind and let the consequences unfold." She turned to face him and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "It is terrifying. It is beautiful. It is why we could not defeat you. It is why I think we are not meant to." She touched his face with one clawed hand, gentle as falling leaves. They had never named what existed between them. It was not romance as humans understood it, not the bonding contract of mates. It was something else, grown from shared grief and shared hope and the strange alchemy of learning to see each other truly. Whatever it was enough. The next day went to the memorial site on the colony world. A ruined building was being rebuilt there, transformed into a monument to those lost in the war. Human and construction crews worked together, clearing debris and laying new foundations. Ra was there, directing hover drones with the easy confidence she had inherited from her mother. Eth was there too, because she went where her family went now. Helped clear rubble. He was a minor celebrity, but he had never been comfortable with standing still while others worked. The physical labor felt good, honest in a way that speeches and ceremonies were not. He was carrying a chunk of broken stone when he heard the scream. A human child, a little girl from the colony, had wandered too close to an unstable section of the ruins. The ground was giving way beneath her, and she was falling, reaching out for something to hold onto, finding nothing but air. Ra moved without thinking. She crossed the distance in a blur of iridescent scales, her long arms reaching, her body placing itself between the child and the crumbling stone. She caught the girl and rolled, shielding her with her own body as debris rained down around them. When the dust settled, Ra was cradling the human child against her chest, both of them breathing hard but unhurt. She looked up at the gathered crowd with wild eyes, realizing only now what she had done. The child's mother ran toward them, her face twisted with fear. She stopped when she saw the alien holding her daughter. For a moment, everything was still. Old prejudices and old fears hung in the air like smoke. Then the mother knelt and pulled both of them into her arms. She wept against Ra's shoulder, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Watched, the construction crews watched. A child had protected a human child without thinking, without calculating, without pausing to consider species or history or any of the walls that had once divided them. She had simply seen someone in danger and acted. Just as had done in a ruined building on a burning world, 3 years and a lifetime ago. He felt Ev's hand find his. Her grip was warm and strong. "She learned this from you," the matriarch said softly. "This is what you taught her, what you taught us all." Could not speak. His throat was too tight, his eyes too wet. He watched Ra help the human child stand, watched them hold hands and walk together toward the worried crowd, watched two mothers embrace their children and each other. This was what they had fought for. This was what they had built. This was the future they had chosen, not perfect, not easy, but real and growing and full of light. The work resumed eventually. Stones were lifted, walls were raised, a memorial took shape where rubble had lain. Worked beside humans and his hands covered in dust, his heart fuller than it had ever been. And somewhere in the ruins where a war had ended and a family had begun, the galaxy learned the most important lesson of all. The most human thing, the most living thing, was to look at someone different and reach out with open hands instead of closed fists. It was the only lesson that had ever mattered. It was the lesson they would never forget.